Здравствуйте, товарищи. Welcome back to Russian Through Propaganda. Today's day 14, and we're continuing with verb conjugations. Remember, we unfortunately have to break Russian verbs down into various types, right? There are a fairly large number. By the way, there are around 25 types altogether. And if you look in the back of the textbook, you'll see a table in each book that gives you an exhaustive look at all these types. And by the way, 25 sounds like a big number. It's really not quite as bad as it sounds. First of all, we're going to cover a lot of the major types just over these 3 days, right? So we'll cover all of the most important verb types. And then a lot of the remaining types, especially the ones in the bottom half of the chart, which they're non-suffixed verbs. They behave very similarly. So again, 25 sounds like a scary number, but that's kind of the number required if we're going to really meticulously categorize all Russian verbs. So let's start out today with more verbs taking your endings. Remember, we can group verb types into two big categories, right? Verbs that take the your endings and verbs that take the e endings. So we're saving the e endings for tomorrow. Today we're spending one more day on verb types that take the your endings, which are more common in Russian generally. Okay, so remember, we've already had I verbs, which are extremely common. We've also had a verbs, which are somewhat less common and more difficult. But both of those types are very important, and both of those types we saw yesterday took your endings. So today we're going to add a few more, starting with another verb type that's extremely common. We're going to call this type ova, right? These are ova verbs because they're built using the suffix ova, right? Again, we take a root, we add ova to it as our suffix, and then we add whatever ending. For example, an infinitive ending like tia, right? And one reason this verb type is so common is that that suffix is used extremely often to create Russian verbs from borrowed verbs, right? So, for example, if we look at this old picture with Tavarish Lenin, we could use the verb mitingovать, which means basically to hold a meeting. And you can see the meeting, right, clearly cognate with the English meeting. This word took on a sort of narrowly political context in Russia, right? So a meeting isn't any meeting generally. It's rather a kind of political rally, right? So they took meeting, added ova to it, and created a new Russian verb meaning, namely mitingovать. Mitingovать meaning to hold a rally, to hold a political rally. So mitingovать is an ova verb, and we could say here that Tavarish Lenin mitinguет. That is, he's holding a meeting. Okay, so we see that something funny happens in the conjugated forms of ova verbs. That suffix ova simply collapses to an u, right? So that entire suffix ova becomes an u in conjugated forms, and then we just simply add the your endings to that new stem with u. So if we keep that one little trick in mind, right? In ova verbs, the ova collapses to an u, then we add the your endings, then we'll see that ova verbs are extremely easy. You know, I sometimes get frustrated in class because I lay out these verb types, and it seems that people take, well, some people basically never learn them at all, right? Which is a bit of a problem if you want to learn Russian. I mean, you really have to learn how to conjugate verbs, especially these major types like I verbs, ova verbs, right? And they're so easy in a way, right? I've just told you everything you need to know about ova verbs, right? You conjugate them, ova becomes u, you add the yo endings, and that's it. There's really no trick to it at all. So it's really quite simple. Now, on top of that, we have some more good news. We've mentioned earlier that if you see an infinitive in ать, you can't be certain what type of verb it is, right? We already saw that yesterday. It could be an I verb, it could be an a verb, and in fact, it could also be an ova verb, right? Ova verbs, their infinitives are going to end in ать, right? But there's more to the story, of course. They end not simply in ать, but in ovать, or sometimes because of spelling rule issues, yevать, right? That's good news because essentially we can easily spot these verbs. We can spot them, right? If we see an infinitive ending in ovać, right? We know that it's an ova verb. And because so many of these verbs are borrowed English speakers can almost always guess the meaning of an ova verb. I mean, not always, but extremely uh, often, right? Very often. Let's take just, I'll throw out a verb, протестовать, протестовать. Okay, we see it's an ova verb, right? Ovать. And because of that, we can be certain that this isn't just a coincidence, that this is a foreign borrowing, in which case it's probably borrowed from French or English, or, in some cases, you have the same verb in both languages, essentially, right? Right, in this case, that's true as well. Протест, right? Protest. Протестовать means to protest. So there are countless verbs like that in Russian. And so again, it's really a bit of good news, right? If we catch on today to how ova verbs work, chances are when we're reading a text and we encounter one, we'll be able to spot that it's an ova verb, we'll be able to guess its meaning, we'll be able to conjugate it. And by the way, because you can imagine nowadays in various spheres, just for example, economics and what have you, right? There are so many of these borrowed verbs that, if you just open the newspaper and start reading, formal Russian in a newspaper article for whatever, you're likely to see a lot of these ova verbs. Okay, well, let's dive in and look at more examples. Our head verb for ova verbs is going to be рисовать, рисовать, meaning to draw. Okay, so рисовать, we see it's an ova verb. To conjugate it, we simply want the ova, that suffix, to collapse to an u. Ova becomes u. We add the yo endings, and we're off to the races. Рисую, рисуешь, рисует, рисуем, рисуете, рисуют. Okay, looking ahead a bit, right? The imperative is going to be рисуй, рисуй. Now again, I'm just listing that here just for reference, basically. And again, if you're an overachiever, you can go ahead and learn those imperative forms. That would be wonderful. But we're going to talk more about them later. Okay, by the way, we add a prefix to that, na, and we get the perfective form of this verb. Again, we're going to talk about that more later. Don't be bothered by it for now. Just the only thing we really care about are the conjugation patterns. But we could say that if we add a prefix to a verb we already know, like рисовать, we prefix it with na, we get нарисовать. We can be confident that the prefixed form is going to conjugate exactly like the unprefixed form, right? So we see that here as well. Нарисую, нарисуешь, нарисует, нарисуем, нарисуете, нарисуют. Okay, танцевать. I warned you, this is actually quite uncommon, but what's going on here essentially is the 5-letter spelling rule. We could think of it that way, right? Remember, the 5-letter spelling rule tells us we can't have an unstressed o after the 4 hushing consonants, zh, ch, sh, or after ts, right? So here, if we were going to add as we normally would, ova to this, that would violate the 5-letter spelling rule. So again, quite unusually, this verb is a good example, right? To dance, танцевать. Okay, by the way, this is related to the German tanzen, right? So again, it's a borrowed verb. Also looks a bit like the English dance, which of course is also related to the German etymologically. Okay, let's conjugate. Okay, in this case, the yeva is collapsing to an u, right? And we get танцую, танцуешь, танцует, танцуем, танцуете, танцуют. Okay, now again, a prefixed variant of that same verb, to dance. This means actually to dance for a bit. It's perfective. Anyway, conjugated forms are потанцую, потанцуешь, потанцует, потанцуем, потанцуете, потанцуют. Okay, as usual, we could practice just drilling new verbs, just catching on to the fact that, yes, indeed, we have to drill these patterns to learn them, right? There's really there's no other way to do it. So let's just take some examples of verbs we might see. Some of them are kind of funny. Let's just take a simple one like протестовать, the one we mentioned earlier. Okay, again, we can see that it's an ova verb simply by looking at the infinitive. We can guess its meaning in all likelihood, or at least get some idea of what it means. in this case, to protest. Okay, to conjugate, ova becomes u, and that's all there is to it. Протестую, протестуешь, протестует, протестуем, протестуете, протестуют. Okay, let's do an exercise, and now we're trying to juggle all of these different forms we've learned, these different verb types we've learned, right? Now we've got three types, I, and ova. Now we could go across the rows here. I think maybe right now it might be better to go down the columns and just focus on the individual types, right? So we might do that first, and then maybe at home you could try going across the row and kind of forcing yourself to juggle all of these different patterns we've learned. See if you can produce the forms. Okay, so let's start with делать and go down the column. Okay, ты. Well, let's think. Can we recall the paradigm, right? Our head verb was читать. Читаю, читаешь, читает. Читаем, читаете, читают. Okay, so делать we see as an I verb. It's going to work the same way. Делаю, делаешь, делает. Делаем, делаете, делают. Okay, so let's fill in the forms. And again, we've got to watch the subject and make sure the verb agrees with the subject. Что ты делаешь? Что он делает? Что вы делаете? Что они делают? Что она делает? Что все делают, right? What is everyone doing? Remember that everyone in Russian, все is a plural form. It's a third plural, right? It literally means all people, all the people. Что все делают? Number 7, что мы делаем? And 8, что я делаю? Okay, let's take the next verb, another I verb, работать, and just go down the column again, making sure our form agrees with the subject. Я работаю. Он работает. Мы работаем. Они работают. Она работает. Все работают. Вы работаете. Ты работаешь. Okay, next verb, писать. Okay, we've got to be careful here. That's an a verb, right? So we can't say писаю, писаешь, писает, right? You're probably already wanting to do that, but we've got to be careful. Okay, how do a verbs work? They take the yo endings, so same endings, but they also mutate in all forms, right? So this S is going to mutate to sh in all the forms. Okay, so I'm writing я пишу. Okay, пишу. Remember also the stress pattern. If an a verb has an infinitive stressed on the final syllable, we can be confident that it's going to show shifting stress, right? So that means я пишу in stress, but then all the other forms it's going to jump back. It's going to shift back onto the stem. So he is writing, он пишет. Мы пишем. Они пишут. Она пишет. Все пишут. Вы пишете. Ты пишешь. Now note all the forms that involved an u, right? Я пишу, они пишут, все пишут, right? The 8-letter spelling rule is reminding us that we have to write u there. We can't write you, right? Okay, let's go to the next column, читать. Okay, now we're back to the I pattern. Я читаю, он читает, мы читаем, они читают, она читает, все читают, вы читаете, ты читаешь. Okay, next column, рисовать. There's our new verb, an ova verb. Okay, the only trick to an ova verb, ova becomes u. Я рисую. Он рисует. Мы рисуем. Они рисуют. Она рисует. Все рисуют. Вы рисуете. Ты рисуешь. How does stress work in ova verbs? Well, it stays put. It's always going to stay, well, at least for the verbs we're looking at right now, it's going to stay wherever it is on the stem, right? Now, keep in mind the ova is part of the stem. It collapses to, I mean, it's the suffix, right? So we start in the infinitive with ova as our suffix. And you see in this case, the stress is on that suffix, ova, right? Рисовать. We know that it's going to remain there in all conjugated forms, right? The only trick is that the ova becomes u, right? But that u, that's going to retain the stress, right? Я рисую, он рисует, and etc. So that's another sense in which ova verbs are really nice. We can guess the stress pattern simply by looking at where it is in the infinitive. The only exception to that are so-called certain native Russian ova verbs, which are basically, they're very few in number. They're basically ova verbs that are native Russian verbs that haven't been borrowed from some other language. So we don't need to worry about those right now. We'll talk about them, I think, sometime in I think maybe even in book 4 they come up. Okay, let's look at one more ova verb, танцевать. Now remember, we see here Yeva instead of ova. That's just the spelling issue, 5-letter spelling rule. Okay, я танцую, I'm dancing, he's dancing, он танцует, мы танцуем, они танцуют, она танцует, все танцуют, вы танцуете, ты танцуешь. Okay, let's do one more exercise. We have 3 columns here, right? Well, let's look at the examples. Что ты делаешь? What are you doing? Okay, now the second column, we're going to get different verbs in each example, right? Let's take работать and fill in the right form. Почему ты всегда работаешь? Why are you always working? Всегда means always. Почему ты никогда не отдыхаешь? Why do you never relax? Okay, so first column we're using делать, which is an I verb. Third column we're using отдыхать, which is also an I verb, so those should be quite easy. But then in the middle column we've got to watch out, right? Which we've got verbs of all 3 types here. Okay, let's take number 1 and go across the row. Что они делают? What are they doing? Okay, let's ask, why are they always working? And here, again, we're using работать. Почему они всегда работают? Okay, why do they never relax? Почему они никогда не отдыхают? Okay, отдыхать, an I verb. Okay, number 2, что вы делаете? Что вы делаете? What are you all doing? Or what are you, sir, doing? Or madam, right, being polite. Почему вы всегда... Okay, читать, that's an I verb, should be easy. Почему вы всегда читаете? Почему вы никогда не отдыхаете? Okay, number 3, what's he doing? Что он делает? Okay, let's say he's writing. Почему он всегда писает? Okay, did you say that? Remember, that means why is he always pissing? Okay, and I'm sorry to be so vulgar all the time, but again, this happens constantly, and it's a mistake you obviously don't want to be making. Okay, so I'll try not to make that joke anymore, but believe me, I'm doing it for a reason. Okay, so писать, that's an a verb, right? Okay, почему он всегда пишет? Пишет. Why is he always writing? Почему он никогда не отдыхает? Why does he never relax? Okay, number 4, what are we doing? Что мы делаем? Why are we always, and let's use рисовать, right? Why are we always drawing? Okay, рисовать, an ova verb. Почему мы всегда рисуем? Почему мы никогда не отдыхаем? Why do we never relax? Okay, number 5, что она делает? Что она делает? What's she doing? Why is she always thinking? Okay, думать, that's an I verb, should be easy. Почему она всегда думает? Почему она никогда не отдыхает? Why does she never relax? Why is she always thinking? Well, as Pushkin said, я жить хочу, чтобы мыслить и страдать, right? I want to live in order to think and suffer. Of course, these are different verb there, мыслить, which is kind of a fancy way of saying думать. I guess part of living is thinking and suffering. Okay, to think is to suffer, perhaps, in some sense. Okay, number 6. Maybe it's a rather Russian point of view on the matter, but who knows? Okay, number 6. Let's see. Что ты делаешь? Что ты делаешь? Why are you always dancing? Почему ты всегда танцуешь? Почему ты всегда танцуешь? Почему ты никогда не отдыхаешь? Okay, number 7. What's Ivan doing? Что делает Иван? Что делает Иван? Что он делает? Why is he always working? Почему он всегда работает? Почему он никогда не отдыхает? Okay, what about Ира? What's she doing? Что делает Ира? Почему она всегда, again, be on guard, a verb, пишет? Почему она всегда пишет? Why is she always writing? Почему она никогда не отдыхает? Okay, the next verb type is also quite easy and maybe not as common as ova verbs, but it's still quite common. And again, this is good news. So try to really master this type. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. We're calling this type new verbs, new. Okay, new again is the suffix that was added to these verbs to create them in the first place. And then to that, on top of the suffix, we add whatever ending. For example, the infinitive ending, tsia, right, soft T, that would give us verbs like our head verb, отдохнуть, which means to relax. Now we saw a verb earlier, отдыхать, which is an I verb. That's the imperfective form of this verb to relax. This head verb we're looking at now, отдохнуть, is perfective. Okay, so we're going to talk about what that means later. We right now, remember, we're only really worried about the conjugation patterns. But I could throw out one quick note that when we conjugate perfective verbs like отдохнуть, the resulting forms are future tense. So you're going to notice that in the table here, right? When we conjugate отдохнуть, we're going to get verbs meaning I will relax, you will relax, and so forth. They're going to be automatically future tense. Now, again, don't worry too much about that now. We're going to talk about it in a lot of detail in, I believe, 2 days, 2 or 3 days. Okay, so how do we conjugate new verbs? Well, basically, we keep the N part of the suffix, and we add the yo endings. The infinitive is going to be wherever it is, sorry, the stress is going to be wherever it is on the infinitive, right? It's going to stay in the same spot. So new verbs are quite easy. Again, we're not going to see a ton of them right off the bat, but again, if you're really ambitious and you want to really master Russian verb types, these ova verbs and new verbs are quite numerous and they're very easy to conjugate. So there's really no reason that we shouldn't really learn this today. Okay, so let's look at some more examples in the table. Отдохнуть. Okay, that's a new verb. We can spot that just by looking at it. Right, we see the infinitive in nуть. And we just want to make sure we keep the N and then add the yo endings. Now, of course, if the stress is on the final syllable, if the stress is starting out on that nu, then it's going to remain on the yo endings, and that's going to allow us to write yo, right? In that stress position, we can have yo. So we get отдохну, отдохнешь, отдохнет, отдохнем, отдохнете, отдохнут. Let's look at another example, привыкнуть. Let's go ahead and conjugate this. Now, here the stress is not on the nu. So when we conjugate it and add the endings, we can't have yo because that isn't in a stressed position. So as we know, we get ye instead. And the resulting forms are привыкну, привыкнешь, привыкнет, привыкнем, привыкнете, привыкнут. Okay, you notice a little note. We're going to worry about this more later, but what are the parentheses doing, right? Why do we call this new in parentheses all of a sudden? Well, that's going to tell us something about the past tense, right? So when we start looking at how to form the past tense for all these verb types, we're going to see that the nu is going to disappear in past tense forms. For that reason, we're going to call this little subtype, we're going to refer to it as disappearing nu verbs, meaning that in the past tense, the nu simply disappears. But as we can see from this table, in terms of our present concern, right, just conjugating these verbs, that makes no difference, right? So all nu verbs act alike in terms of these conjugated forms we're looking at right now. Okay, a couple more verbs. Mürznуть, meaning to freeze, like I'm freezing. Okay, again, look at the stress. Mürznуть. That means it's not on the ending, right? And we get mjörznu, mjörznish, mjörzniet, mjörznium, mjörznitie, mjörznut. And a perfective verb, zamjörznut, meaning to freeze completely. Again, we'll talk about the difference later. The forms are going to be zamjörznu, zamjörznish, zamjörzniet, zamjörznium, zamjörznitie, zamjörznut. Okay, let's do a quick exercise, just practicing some new verbs. Мы мерзнем. Ничего, привыкните. We're freezing. It's nothing, you'll get used to it. Okay, so again, привыкнуть is also perfective, so when we conjugate it, the forms are future tense and meaning. Okay, so two good verbs to practice for living in Russia, right? First, freezing, and also getting used to things, including the cold. Okay, I'm freezing. Я мерзну. Okay, it's nothing, you'll get used to it. Ничего, ты привыкнешь. Ты привыкнешь. Okay, number two, they're freezing. Они мерзнут. Мерзнут. It's nothing, they'll get used to it. Ничего, они привыкнут. Привыкнут. Number three, are you freezing? Ты мерзнешь. Ничего. We're asking someone, are you freezing? And they respond, it's nothing, I'll get used to it. Ничего, я привыкну. Number four, are you all freezing? Or are you, sir or madam, freezing? Вы мерзнете? Ничего, мы привыкнем. And actually in the response we see that this, right, this is actually a you plural, right? Are you guys freezing? Are you all freezing? It's nothing, we'll get used to it. Ничего, мы привыкнем. Ничего, мы привыкнем. I remember in terms of freezing that my first year in Russia, I went to a Champions League soccer game in Moscow in the old Olympic Stadium at Luzhniki, and it was freezing. I think it was in February. It was absolutely frigid, and I didn't know how I was going to get through the soccer game. I dressed as warmly as I could, and basically my friends and I stood around in a little outside a little kind of food stand and ate some hot dogs and drank quite a bit of vodka before we entered the stadium. And that's not necessarily a good idea, they tell me, because in fact it kind of deadens your sensitivity to the cold, such that of course if you consume enough of it, you might risk freezing to death. But it has at least a kind of pseudo warming effect, right? So anyway, I survived, as you can see, and lived to tell about it. Anyway, let's look at another verb type, yay verbs. There aren't very many of these, so we're just throwing this out because a couple of them are rather common. Yay verbs act a lot like I verbs, right? The only difference, as you can see, is in that suffix we're adding yay. We have a yeah instead of the in I, right? So these conjugated forms are going to look very familiar. The only difference is, right, we've got now yeah instead of right? So that makes these quite easy. Okay, if we look over a few examples here, umieć. Umieć is a fairly common one, to know how to do something. Now, let's look what's happening here, right? The form looks a lot like, let's think back to читать. Читаю, читаешь, читает, читаем, читаете, читают. We see here it's the exact same pattern, only difference is yeah instead of Умею, умеешь, умеет, умеем, умеете, умеют. Now note the yeah combination, right? Remember that those are two distinct syllables, both of which begin with a yeah sound, an и краткая sound. Умею, умеешь, умеет, умеем, умеете, умеют. Иметь means to have, and that's usually used in a more kind of figurative sense, right? We already know that the idiom for having objects, for owning things, is completely different, right? У меня, у тебя. So this is used in other situations. We'll see examples here in a moment. In any case, иметь is a yay verb. Имею, имеешь, имеет, имеем, имеете, имеют. Успеть means to get something done in time, right? To manage to do something in time. It's a yay verb as well. Успею, успеешь, успеет, успеем, успеете, успеют. And стареть, we'll learn later that there are a lot of yay verbs that mean to become something, and they're built from adjectives. So, for example, starый means old, as we know. So we take starый, we get rid of the y, right? We get rid of that adjectival ending, and we make a verb by adding the suffix yay, and we get a new yay verb meaning to become whatever the adjective is, in this case, old, right? So the verb стареть means to grow old, to become old. And it's conjugated like this: старею, стареешь, стареет, стареем, стареете, стареют. Okay, let's do an exercise and just fill in a few of these verbs. Уметь and успеть. So we're talking about, do you know how to read, or are you able to do these things, right? And then will you manage to get it done in time? Okay, number one, will he manage to read this? Sorry, does he know how to read this book? Is he able to read this book? Он умеет читать эту книгу? Okay, now let's ask, will he manage to get it read, to read it in time? Он успеет прочитать эту книгу? Okay, by the way, we're seeing some differences here in the verb forms. This is a first glance at how aspect works, right? Читать means to read generally. Прочитать basically means to finish reading, to read completely, right? Читать, прочитать. And we're asking, will he manage to get it read, right? To read it completely. And to express that idea, we use a perfective verb. Okay, so прочитать is the perfective version of the imperfective читать. Okay, so again, for now, we're just glimpsing that difference. We're going to talk about it more in a couple of days. Number two, are they able to do everything? Or do they know how to do everything? Они умеют все делать. Они умеют все делать. Okay, will they manage to get everything done? To do everything. Они успеют все сделать. Они успеют все сделать. Number three, do you know how to write an article? Are you able to write an article? Вы умеете писать статью? Вы умеете писать статью? Will you manage to get the article written? Вы успеете написать статью? Вы успеете написать статью? Number four, is she able to do this? Does she know how to do this? Она умеет это делать. Она умеет это делать. Will she manage to get it done in time? Она успеет это сделать. Она успеет это сделать. Number five, does Mikhail know how to write a letter? Mikhail умеет писать письмо. Will he manage to get the letter written? Will he manage to get it written in time? Он успеет написать письмо. Number six, does Yulia know how to draw? Yulia умеет рисовать. Okay, will she manage to draw this cat in time? Let's imagine, maybe it's a school assignment. Она успеет нарисовать эту кошку. Она успеет. Again, we see that this verb успеть is followed by an infinitive, much like in the English. And we'll see that in Russian, generally speaking, uses of the infinitive mirror English very closely. So if you look at let's look back at the example two. Успеешь прочитать? Will you manage to read? Right? In English, we get an infinitive, and in Russian, we do as well. Ты успеешь прочитать? Look at the poster here. Толстеть значит стареть. To grow fat means to grow old. Okay, so толстеть is another one of these verbs meaning to become something, and it's related to the adjective толстый, which means fat. By the way, you may have thought of the Russian writer Tolstoy. His last name essentially means fat. It's simply an in-stressed variant of, right, instead of Tolstoy, we get Tolstoy. So anyway, it's just kind of a variation of that same adjective. Okay, number 14, 14.2 here. When do we use imieć, right? We learned earlier that just talking about I have this, I have that, right, expressing possession, we use a completely different idiom than in English, right? In Russian, we don't say I have a book, we say a book is at me. So earlier we weren't using a verb to have, but there is such a verb, imieć, and it's usually used in more figurative or abstract senses, like, I don't know, to sort of like the English maybe to possess, right? That type of thing. Although it can be translated as simply to have in English as well. Let's just look over a few phrases and you'll get a sense of the ways in which imieć is used. For example, imieć в виду means to have in mind or to mean, right? What do you have in mind? What do you mean? That's imieć в виду. And you can see that, that's somewhat abstract or figurative. Иметь значение means to have significance, meaning to matter, right? Это имеет значение means that has significance, it matters, versus не иметь значения. By the way, you may note the slight shift after that negated verb, we get an object popping up in the genitive, right? See how the yeah has switched to ya? We'll talk more about that some other time. Не иметь понятия means to have no idea, right? A понятие is an idea. Okay, so just a few example sentences. Что ты имеешь в виду? What do you mean? Это не имеет значения. That doesn't matter. Почему он это делает? Why is he doing that? Понятия не имею, right? I have no idea. Okay, so just a few examples. Let's do an exercise and fill in some more yay verbs. Let's say, first we have some kind of question, and then the response, я понятия не имею. I have no idea. Я понятия не имею. That's a fairly common phrase in Russian, so we're just going to repeat it every time here, no change. Okay, for example, почему они краснеют? Why are they blushing? Краснеть means to turn красный, which means red, right? So to blush, краснеть means to become red, or that is to blush. Я понятия не имею. Okay, number one, what significance does this have? Meaning, why is this important? Какое это имеет значение? Okay, the это here is the subject, actually, this, right? What significance does this have? Какое это имеет значение? Answer, я понятия не имею. I have no idea. Number two, will we manage to get everything done? Мы успеем все сделать? Я понятия не имею. I have no idea. Number three, does he know how to dance? Он умеет танцевать? Я понятия не имею. Number four, what does she have in mind? Что она имеет в виду? Я понятия не имею. I have no idea what she has in mind. Number five, what are we doing here? Okay, now watch out. Some of these verbs are not yay verbs, right? Here we have an I verb. What are we doing here? Что мы здесь делаем? Я понятия не имею. Number six, why are we reading this text? Почему мы читаем этот текст? Я понятия не имею. Number seven, who listens to such music? Кто слушает такую музыку? Я понятия не имею. Remember, слушать is also an I verb. Кто слушает? Number 8, does the child already know how to read? Is it already able to read? Ребенок умеет читать? Я понятия не имею. Number 9, what is he drawing? Okay, here's an ова verb, right? Рисовать is an ова verb. Что он рисует? Что он рисует? Я понятия не имею. I have no idea. Number 10, do they dance well? Они хорошо танцуют? Я понятия не имею. Again, танцевать is an ova verb. Okay, next we need to introduce non-suffixed verb types. We mentioned this briefly the other day. I think I also mentioned earlier, perhaps that if you look at the reference chart in the back of the book, right, pretty much the bottom half of the chart, those are all non-suffixed verbs. And we can see that they all act more or less the same. There are a few exceptions, but essentially the problem is the final bit of the stem is not seen in the infinitive. So for example, if we take a verb like жить, that means to live, and the conjugated forms are живу, живешь, живет, etc. Right? So we see immediately that there's a little problem. How do we know that the stem is živ if we can't see that in the infinitive? Well, the answer is we can't, right? Obviously, right? Žít, we have no idea looking at that infinitive that the actual stem of the verb ends in a v, right? That it's živ, right? So we're going to tag verbs like this, non-suffixed verbs, by a number of things. Often it's going to be the final consonant in the stem, right? So for example, žít, we're going to say that's a v verb, and that tag is giving us that last bit of information that we need to know in addition to the infinitive in order to conjugate it correctly. Of course, that's the bad news about non-suffix verbs. There's often something about that the very ending of the stem that we can't know by looking at the infinitive, right? Now, but the good news is that once we have that little missing bit of information, in this case, v, right, we simply add the yule endings and we're done. There aren't any mutations usually. We just simply add the yule endings. So for example, žít is a v verb. That means the stem is going to be živ. Let's add the yule endings. We get живу, живешь, живет, живем, живете, живут. Okay, so very easy. Okay, we're not going to have a whole lot of verbs like this right off the bat, but we will start adding them. So for example, žít, it'll be a while before we get another v verb, right? I think maybe in chapter 3 or 4 we'll see one. So there won't be a ton of these verbs, but generally speaking, there will be a lot of non-suffix verbs generally, right? But all the particular types are relatively rare, right? So again, these v verbs, we're not going to be seeing tons of v verbs. But if we look at the next verb, we have a g verb. Okay, so kind of the same thing going on. We have an infinitive moch, which means to be able to do something. Now note that infinitive is somewhat unusual. We see ch, right? We see not a soft T, but a ch, right? This is a rather unusual type, and it's buried at the very bottom of the chart. It's a difficult type because you do get mutations, right? So this usually doesn't happen with non-suffix verbs, but for this verb, which is a very important one, a very common one, you do get the g mutating to je in the so-called inner form. See that black box, right? You have the outer forms, right? Magu and mogut, and then the inner forms, which all mutate. Okay, so again, that has a reason historically, but we're not going to get into that right now. We just have to learn the pattern. Now, by the way, a lot of textbooks would probably present this verb to be able, right? Or often in English we say I can, you can, he, she, or it can, right? We use can. They would say that that's just kind of an irregular verb, but it's not an irregular verb because there are other verbs that belong to this verb type, other ge verbs lurking out there. There aren't a ton of them, and we won't see very many of them in book 1. But again, we're going to go ahead and tag this according to type and continue we're going to continue to refer to it as a ge verb and keep an eye out for additional ge verbs down the road. Okay, let's read through the pattern. It's a rather tricky one. Могу, можешь, может, можем, можете, могут. Look at the shifting stress pattern. And again, we also see that the inner forms show mutations. Okay, let's practice some of these verbs. First, let's take жить, our verb, and just fill in questions like, are you living well? Is someone living well? Like, for example, он хорошо живет, right? Is he living well? Is he doing okay? Number one, let's take ты. Ты хорошо живешь. Ты хорошо живешь. Okay, number two, мы. Are we living well? Мы хорошо живем. Живем. Number three, они. Are they getting on well? Are they living well? Они хорошо живут. And number four, are you all living well? Вы хорошо живете. Or again, that could be speaking politely to one person. Okay, next batch, let's use мочь, to be able to do something. And like we mentioned earlier, right, the use of the infinitive here is pretty much like in English, right? We can say, for example, она может работать. Is she able to work? Should be a she there. Is she able to work, right? We get an infinitive in English and also in Russian. Okay, number five, are you able to work? Ты можешь работать? Ты можешь работать? Number six, are they able to work? Они могут работать. Они могут работать. Number seven, are you all able to work? Вы можете работать? And number eight, am I able to work? Я могу работать. Я могу работать. And we see a poster here with the verb жить, right? We see a rather notorious quote from Stalin. You see it alluded to quite often. Жить стало лучше, товарищи. Жить стало веселее, а когда весело живется, работа спорится. Okay, of course, there's a lot of grammar there we can't understand, but if we start with the most famous part of the phrase, жить стало лучше. It has become better to live, right? Life has become better. It has become better, лучше, to live, жить. Okay, if we move forward, we have one more non-suffixed verb to learn today. It's a rather tricky one, and maybe one of the trickiest tags we have, и краткое M. This is called a non-syllabic verb root, right? A non-syllabic root. And we're going to represent that by using a forward slash that's taking the place of a vowel, right? Most Russian verbs, and we noticed this, most Russian roots, we've seen this already, like živ, right? We just saw živ is the root meaning life, living, right? Most Russian roots consist of a consonant plus a vowel plus another consonant, but some don't have a vowel. That's an inherent part of the root. So just as a way to mark this up formally, we're going to represent this root as и краткое /m, meaning again, it doesn't have any vowel that's inherent to the root. Okay, so the infinitive for this verb is понять, which means to grasp, to understand something. It happens to be perfective, so we see that the conjugated forms are going to be future tense in meaning. Again, more on that later. Now again, essentially here, the tag is giving us that final bit of information that we can't get from the infinitive. And you can see more descriptions of this in the book, right? This is a rather tricky thing. I don't want to spend too much time on it. Essentially, this particular root for grasping is just a very tricky one for historical reasons. Okay, for now, let's just supply the и краткое M, add the yo endings, and we get our verb conjugation. So понять, to understand, or literally to grasp, becomes пойму, поймешь, поймет, поймем, поймете, поймут. Let's do an exercise here. Let's say And we're here getting our first glimpse of dative pronoun forms, right? So just for practice right now, we'll study them in detail later. So for example, tell to him, right? Tell him in the dative why your laundry is so dirty, right? Скажи ему, почему белье у тебя такое грязное. Okay, now let's practice our verbs. Он не поймет. Он не поймет. That's the perfective verb for understanding. He won't understand, right? We get a future tense meaning. And then we want to say generally, he doesn't understand anything. Here we're using the verb понимать, which again is the imperfective form of the verb understand, to understand, and it's an I verb, so it's very easy to conjugate. So он не поймет, he won't understand, and then our easy I verb, он ничего не понимает, he doesn't understand anything. Okay, скажи нам, какая у тебя новая идея? Tell us, right? Dative, again, tell to us, say to us. Tell us what kind of new idea you have. Какая у тебя новая идея? You all won't understand. Вы не поймете. Вы не поймете. You don't understand anything. Вы ничего не понимаете. Okay, number 2, tell her, dative. Say to her, tell to her why you don't have a Russian dictionary. Почему у тебя нет русского словаря? There's our genitive of non-existence. Okay, she won't understand. She doesn't understand anything. Она не поймет. Она ничего не понимает. Number 3, tell them why your clothes are so strange. Скажи им, почему одежда у тебя такая странная? They won't understand. Они не поймут. They don't understand anything. Они ничего не понимают. Okay, number 4, tell me why your telephone is so old. Скажи мне, почему телефон у тебя такой старый? Okay, response, you won't understand, you don't understand anything. Ты не поймешь, ты ничего не понимаешь. Number 5, again, tell me why. Okay, number 5, tell me what you have in mind. And we're using вы here. Let's imagine we're being polite. Although, again, it could be referring to more than one person. Скажи мне, что вы имеете в виду? Okay, again, answering using вы. Вы не поймете. Вы ничего не понимаете. Number 6, tell him why your grandfather doesn't have a computer. Скажи ему, почему у твоего дедушки нет компьютера. Он не поймет, он ничего не понимает. Number 7, I'll tell you what kind of problem I have. I'll tell you what my problem is. Я скажу тебе, какая у меня проблема. Let's say, I won't understand, I don't understand anything. Я не пойму, я ничего не понимаю. Okay, one last thing to look at today. Все versus все. Okay, we introduced все quite a while ago, and we mentioned that it's plural, right? It means literally all people, right? Now, of course, in English, everyone is treated as a singular noun, right? Everyone is, or for example, everyone works. In Russian, you would say все работают, right? Все, again, means all people, essentially. So it's treated as a plural subject, right? Все работают. Now, there's a related word, все. We'll talk more about how these words are related. Essentially, все is a plural form, все is a neuter singular form of the same word, right? So it means really quite literally everything, right? Just this neuter singular form, everything. Now note the difference in our textbook. We're going to try to always mark these, right? Все with the dots versus все. But if you're reading an actual Russian text, that normally wouldn't be done. So if you see все on a page, right, that letter combination, and it's not in our textbook, right, keep in mind that it could be все or it could be все. You would have to judge from context. And one bit of context that can help you decide whether it's все or все is a verb, right? If you happen to have a verb, Well, look at the form. If it's plural, then your subject is indeed все. If it's singular, then your subject is все. Right now, again, that's not quite as important in these textbooks because I'm going to always try to mark the yo. Wherever we have a yo, I'll try to mark it as such. But again, if you open any other book or an actual Russian text, keep in mind that they won't typically do that. Let's look at some examples. Все было хорошо. Right, note the neuter verb, right? Neuter singular. Все было хорошо. Все работает. Everything's working. Now compare that to все работают. Everyone is working. Plural. Все работают. Все были дома. Everyone was at home, right? Все были дома. Okay, that's it for today. We've got one more day of verb conjugations, and at that point, we will have seen all of the major verb types, and we'll continue to fill in additional ones as we go throughout the course. Until next time, this thing never gets old. It never gets old. It's so soothing. Anyway, until next time, до свидания.